What's up, marketing maniacs, and welcome back to another episode of From Startup to Wunderbrand, your ultimate BFF in the wide world of digital marketing. Join me, your host, Nicholas Kuhner, spilling the beans on the juiciest trends and hottest tips to up your marketing game. Hello, everyone. Now, in a world where everyone relies on Google to send business to us, making sure that your website is up to date and is generating the right amount of information or giving clients the information they need to find you is super important. And this is where Google Analytics 4 comes in, but also specialists who know how to utilize and get the best out of your website. We've got Philippa Games, who has worked over 5,000 websites, so really knows her way around Google Analytics in particular, and making sure that you can drive as much traffic to your website as possible. So, Philippa, wonderful to have you with us this evening.
Hi, Nicholas. Great to be with you. Love the Northern Lights and all that.
It's great. I couldn't afford the real Northern Lights, so I thought I'd stick it up on the screen behind me. But having said that, I was chatting to a friend this evening. We can actually see the Northern Lights from our roof. So wow. not in Technicolor like you can see behind me. Now, Philippa, you don't sound particularly American, but you live in America, yeah?
Yes, that's right. But I am originally a Brit.
Yeah.
So
okay. So we're gonna chat a little bit about websites and analytics and some of the things that the sort of small things that people can do to improve their website. So I'm taking on those 5,000 websites, you've worked with a vast sort of gamut of clients, from large clients, multinational clients, startups, etc. Let's maybe start with, what are some of the biggest mistakes people make with their websites?
I would say the biggest mistake is a lot of websites don't necessarily have a clear plan of what they want to do with the site, what the outcomes are that they're looking for, so that they are really driving people towards those outcomes. So, one of the things I often see is sites where they've got great content and you read the content and then you don't know what to do. And so you leave because, you got other things to do. So, and that goes for analytics too, because people say to me, there's so much data, I'm completely overwhelmed, which is a very natural response, right? So how on earth do I know where to start? And the only way you can really know where to start is if you know what you're looking for. So, what are the calls to action? What do I want people to do? Where do I want people to go? Which is the content that I want people to consume? That kind of thing. And also, what types of visitors do I have? How are they different? And therefore, for different types of visitors, what do I want to do? I mean, visitors aren't all the same, obviously. So really, first of all, thinking through what your strategies are, what your goals are, what you're trying to achieve, what you expect to happen, so that then you can say, okay, is that happening?
The word or phrase you used there that strikes me is call to action. I've seen that a lot of times where people want 20 pages on their website and they want tons of content. But if you don't understand the customer journey in terms of what is this page trying to deliver, what is this solving for a customer, you're just wasting people's time and you're not giving anyone any value. So that call to action aspect that you speak to is super important. What type of calls to action are most typical on websites? What type of call to action should folks look at when they're building their site?
So again, the call to action, which is the thing that tells somebody what to do next, is obviously depending on what you're looking for. So if you're trying to get them to buy something, then obviously you're doing those things. So add this to your checkout process, etc. Most people aren't going to buy the first time they come to a website. That's another thing you see. Lots of websites, you get to the site and it's screaming at you to buy my stuff, buy this now. And most people don't do that. They want to know who you are, what you have, maybe compare what you have with other competitors, make a decision, So it's important to create relationship, and that could be sign up for our newsletter and get exclusive offers. It could be watch this video that tells you a whole lot more about how people use our product, for example. Thinking about the purpose of each page, and really with the mindset that not each page is necessarily designed to sell something immediately, but it's designed to sort of nurture people along the way. And some sites, obviously, especially in B2B, aren't selling anything directly. They're doing lead generation, right? Because the actual sale is more complicated, doesn't take place directly on the website. I wrote a book a while ago, and one of the things I was saying is that you get asked questions and there really aren't necessarily one size fits all answers, which is why I keep coming back to, you've got to know what your site is trying to do.
That nurturing, again, I'm just going to pick out little gems that you throw out there and discuss them a bit more. The nurturing is very important for websites. And exactly as you mentioned, people don't buy the first time they come onto a website. Sometimes they're just checking, for example, on B2B, that you're actually a company that actually exists. That would be the first step in that. The second one is they want to see how your product works. Perhaps it's a comparison site. They need a blog. So there's the blog aspect, there's the video aspect, there's the lead generation aspect in terms of downloading an ebook or joining the newsletter. I mean, websites there are so many cool things you can do with them. But as you said, you've got to understand the customer journey. You've got to understand what kind of information your customer is looking for. How do we find out that customer journey? How do you build out a website to actually deliver on what customers want? So what's your process, Philippa?
Right. So maybe we should just very briefly remind folks what the customer journey is. The customer journey is describing the whole process from before somebody's ever heard of you through to hopefully they're becoming a loyal repeat customer. So before they've ever heard of you, they wake up one morning and they go, oh, I need X. And you happen to sell X. So that's great. So they go to a search engine and they look who sells X, right? And they find your site. So the first time that the customer finds you, we call that acquisition. So that's the first time that they hear about you. And at that point, you're introducing yourself. It's like a conversation, right? So you're saying, hello, here's who I am. Or who we are. Here's what we've got and how it can help you with your particular need. And then hopefully they say, oh, that's interesting. And then you want to sort of engage them. You want to talk to them. You want to tell them more while they're thinking about, do I want to buy this thing from you or from somebody else? And there are going to be all sorts of factors that are going to play into their decision. And it may be a very simple price point, or hopefully it's also going to be based on things like quality and the perceived level of your service and that kind of thing. So they're looking for reviews. Hopefully they're looking for testimonials. Maybe they're looking on your site for more content and more information about what you sell and how it works, how people use it, right? So they're doing research, which in the customer journey is often called consideration, right? And then they make a decision. So hopefully at that point they decide to buy your stuff. And at that point, it's very important that the purchase process is very easy and intuitive. And we still hear all sorts of stories about how many people abandon their shopping carts, right? For all sorts of reasons. Maybe they do change their mind, but it may be because you don't offer the sort of payment option that they're looking for. It might be because they're shocked rigid when they see your shipping costs. It could be all sorts of things, but hopefully they make the purchase. And then after they make the purchase, assuming that your business is the sort of business that has repeat customers, you want them to become a loyal customer that keeps coming back to you. Because, there's an old marketing saying that it's 5 times the expense of getting a new customer in terms of marketing costs than it is to keep an existing one. So that's about support. It's about making them feel valued. It's about, doing things like loyalty programs or exclusive previews or whatever it might be to keep their business. So there's a whole process here. And it's really important, going back to, knowing what your website's trying to do, because you need to have some sort of concept of where people are when they're on your site. And again, as I said, a lot of people just focus on that purchase stage. But there are 3 other stages. There's the initial acquisition and then getting them interested and then retaining them that are also really, really important. So you really have to think through the whole process.
Well, the customer journey is one of my favorite marketing topics. I lecture in digital marketing and I use the customer journey as the foundation for everything that I do with anybody. Because if you understand where somebody is, in the customer journey, you know what channel to use, what language to use, what hook to use. It just makes it so much easier. And it's amazing how many people um, don't think about the customer journey or don't take it that seriously. And as you said, if you know where the customer is, are they ready to buy? Are they just interested? You don't want to chase somebody off by saying buy now, 10% off, and
Mhm.
chasing them away. Now, one of the big changes lately has been, and a lot of people have been scared about this who are perhaps smaller companies, is where Google says we're changing over from Universal Analytics to Google Analytics 4. And, as a non-specialist analytics person myself, I'm like, crap, what am I going to do? What does this move from Universal Analytics to Google Analytics 4 really mean?
So, firstly, I think that part of the reason that Google did it was because of privacy concerns. So, especially in Europe with GDPR, there were mounting concerns about how Google tracks and stores data. And so GA4 is much more sort of privacy oriented. So that was one of the pressing reasons why they did it. And the complete change took place last July, and Google did set up sort of automatic transfer for people who didn't do it themselves. So, I mean, by now, everybody who's got Google Analytics well, you can't run the previous version. It doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't work. But you're probably running GA4, even if you haven't really looked at it. If you haven't looked at it, I would highly encourage that you do, because it is remarkably different. And you should actually, if you have a website, you should be running analytics. We're talking about Google Analytics here. Obviously, it's not the only game in town, especially in Europe. There are other packages that are out there. If you're an enterprise business, you might be running Adobe, but you should run something, because if you don't, I believe that you're basically shooting in the dark with everything that you're doing with your online marketing, because you really don't know what's going on. You can look at your website and it doesn't tell you what visitors are doing. And sometimes you can be really surprised by what visitors actually do, because you get so close to your own stuff that you can't believe that people can't see where the call to action is, or, where the video is, or whatever, or how to do something, how to find something. So yeah, really, if you don't have analytics, whatever you're doing, get it going.
Yeah, I mean, that goes without saying. I think anyone not generating free data is a moron in this particular stage. But you spoke about something interesting, which is and it's particularly in Europe, and that is the privacy and cookies. And I know there's been a lot of talk around here about that. And one of the irritating things about coming to Norway has been every single website I click on, I've got to say, do you want cookies? Yes, no, how many of them? And honestly, sometimes I just go out of the website because I don't actually, number one, I know now all of the tracking that they've got on me, and I don't want that. And number two, it's a bit of a, I can't be asked actually to now go and uncheck things. So how are companies, and especially European or perhaps American companies now, generating data in this time where Apple is now stopping cookies? Google is now getting worried about getting sued left, right, and center, and privacy laws are becoming so pervasive. How are websites or our websites useful places to generate first, primary research on our customers versus just cookies tracking them around the web?
Right. So we should be clear that analytics, there are two types of cookies. So there's third-party cookies and first-party cookies. So third-party are the ones that are going away, because they're cookies that you as a website owner, your business doesn't own. They're placed by, in order to make advertising better targeted and so on. Right. So they're not your cookies. The first-party cookies, which are your cookies that you place on the site, are not banned in that sense, because it's your data that you're not sharing. And, there's also a lot of people saying to some extent this has gone too far, because what first-party cookies do is make your experience easier on the site. So, if you've logged in and you've given your password and you want to stay logged in, that's a cookie. If you put something in your shopping cart and you go away and you come back and you don't want to start again, You want to go back to, okay, what have I got in my shopping cart? What have I got on my wish list? That's done by cookies. So, we're very paranoid about data, and we should be. And it's a sort of double-edged sword. And for marketers, it's interesting because none of us like being tracked. So you're talking about how you don't like being tracked. But when you've got your marketing hat on, you want to know what visitors are doing and how they're responding to your site. You don't want to be tracked, but you want everybody else to let you track them, right?
Exactly.
So, it's not as simple as it sounds. Now, one of the things that Google, for example, has is this thing called consent mode, where you get the cookie banners and stuff. It does do some level of very anonymized tracking so that it can do predictive modeling of behaviors using AI, so that you don't know about individual users, but you might be able to say, based on this model, we can say that most users would do X. Now, that is something that's being worked on. But the problem there is that for very smaller sites, smaller businesses, that's not going to be so effective because you need a certain amount of data for that to be statistically reasonable, right? And you have to know, I mean, this is something I tell my clients all the time. You have to know that the analytics it's not Nielsen rating. It's not statistically, it's not auditable numbers, right? So it this doesn't represent all your visitors. And I've seen some estimates that up to 50% of your visitors aren't allowing you to track them. So you're losing, a lot of that. But what you're looking for there for an analytics is not the actual number of visitors, but what the trends are, what the trends of behaviors are, and where it looks like there could be problems. And that's really what you can see analytics is being useful for. It's not an audit tool.
So you pulled out 2 points there, which is first-party cookies and third-party cookies, and I think people need to be able to separate those two out. The point of why we need cookies is exactly as you mentioned. I mean, if you go onto a website and you don't allow them to have any information on you, they don't know if you're coming from a mobile phone, a tablet, an Android device. So your experience might be a bit trash as well. So the fundamentals of cookies are good. And as you say, it's a double-edged sword. We can, the more information marketers have, the better they can serve you with better quality content. But obviously, there are bad actors there that take advantage of this and, use it to track you around the internet and things like that. So it's a tough one. And there's always this balance. And the same thing with medical data as well. If governments knew all the medical data of everyone that lived in their country, and insurance companies knew they'd be able to build enough hospitals, have enough kidneys and, everything, blood available. But because we don't share that information, the ability to deliver properly in terms of services is diminished. But you also don't want the government knowing that you've got a kidney problem or your employer knowing that you've got some nasty hereditary illness and they don't hire you. So it's a tough spot to be in for websites. But anyway, let's move on to some sort of more positive sides on websites. Can you maybe talk through some? I went to your website and I saw some interesting services here because I very often I don't want somebody to spend their whole life working on my website. I don't need you necessarily to work on my website for the next 5 years and update it every single 5 minutes. And I see you've got a Pick My Brain hour, which is one of your options here. And I think that for me, for example, would be very useful because I've got 39 pages which aren't indexed at the moment. And I have no idea why it isn't indexed, but the rest of my pages are indexed. Tell me what you do in a Pick My Brain hour and what type of questions do you get in these sessions?
So the Pick My Brain is it's literally that. So I should be very clear. I mean, it's designed for people who don't want to go into a whole project. So, it's, can you have a quick look at my analytics and tell me X?
So, Philippa, we've been talking generally about websites and SEO and analytics and so on. But what I want to go into is something where the cookie is crumbling. Right now, we've got Google's being not allowed to use cookies by the European Union. I think the states are getting a bit tougher on it. Apple is stopping a lot of websites being able to generate information from cookies. And I think that in one sense, it's very good not having too much of your personal information out there. But the problem is that as a consumer, you actually do need to give a certain amount of information away in order to have a better experience on a website or get marketing materials that are relevant to you. So how have you seen this market change, and how do you think businesses with websites or businesses that are using data analytics or website analytics can get over this hump?
So first of all, let's just distinguish carefully, because there are two types of cookies, right? There's a first-party cookie and third-party cookie. So first-party cookies are owned by the website, by that business, and they are not banned if the user agrees to accept them, and they're not going away. So the first-party cookie does important things for your experience, like it remembers what you've got in your shopping cart if you leave the site and comes back, right? Or your login. So you don't have to constantly keep giving in your login and your password and all of that. So, there are things that it does, like you said, that enhance our experience, as well as giving useful information to the site owner. That what's being phased out is the third-party cookie, which is like third-party advertising cookies that are used to make advertising, targeting, and so forth more effective. But sometimes they lead to you feeling like you're being stalked online, because you look at a product and the next thing you know, you're seeing ads for that product wherever you go. That's gone. I mean, I'm happy that that's going to go. Although I'm not an advertiser, so maybe I shouldn't. Honestly, I do think to some extent that there are some rumblings that say that the whole privacy thing has gone over the top a little bit, because it's attacking some of the things that are useful as well as the things that are not. And, sometimes I wonder to myself, given that in analytics, certainly with Google Analytics, it's completely against policy to store any personally identifiable information in the analytics data. So that means anything that can be specifically tied to one person, like an email address or obviously a credit card number and so forth. And we would expect those things to be protected and secure. So, whether or not anybody is actually going to download a huge Google Analytics data set and piece together enough data to try and figure out who these people are, I don't know. Sometimes I wonder how much of a threat it really is. But
most companies don't keep personal information, or most people won't have access to, again, credit card details. There should be sufficient security around that. Obviously, you've got bad actors. And if somebody wants to find out, for example, more about you, Philippa, they can do it. It's like if somebody really wants to get into your house, they are going to get into your house. No amount of security you've got is really going to stop them.
Yeah.
I
know my mother used to shred every bill so that people couldn't get her address. And I used to tell, mother, anybody can find out your address.
And I mean, the amount of things that we put out in terms of social media, like birthdays and where we've been on holiday and things like that. I mean, smart people could figure out all sorts of things about us, which we...
Right, without cookies. I mean, what Facebook can figure out is actually, I find, quite scary. But at the same time, so what the actual cumulative effect of this is, as of next month, for example, Google has a thing called consent mode, where if you implement it in what it calls an advanced kind of way, it will it will take really seriously anonymous data and use it to try to model what's likely to happen so that it can still inform, Google Ads and so forth. And if you don't have consent mode implemented for your analytics, as of March, I believe you're not going, if you're in the EU or affected areas, you're not going to be able to use Google Ads or Google services in to some extent. So, that is an issue. And
they might have gone a little bit overboard, and this might not spell the end for Google and companies like that in Europe, but it does mean, I think advertisers are going to perhaps push back a little bit against that, because again, how do we get our messaging in front of the folks that need it? So that's one aspect. And I think important note, again, first party and third party cookies, very different. And again, the data you're getting on your site, people are typically allowing you to have that, and you'll be able to use that to improve your offering and services to customers. But the third party, which is those ads that follow you around relentlessly around the web, those can go away. So those can bugger off, basically. But let's talk about analytics and perhaps some experience you've had where this has actually made a difference. So if we think about analytics, I suppose we're talking about Google Analytics, the information that you are getting from Google for your page. And there are a variety of tools. There's SEMrush, there's Ahrefs, there's also a couple of other platforms that you can use to analyze it. Maybe talk to me about how you go about analyzing how effective a website is.
So Google Analytics is one tool, and there are others. I mean, Adobe is a much sort of more enterprise level solution. In Europe, there are tools that are really focusing on the whole privacy issue, so like Piwik and Matomo and so on. So we shouldn't only talk about Google.
Yeah.
SEMrush and Ahrefs SEO analytics tools specifically.
Yeah.
But what's interesting is one of the things I like to say is that many times when I look at a website, there are opportunities for new products or services or target markets, which wouldn't be clear or obvious unless you were looking at the analytics. In fact, I have an ebook that I just made that hopefully you might put a link to under the show notes, where I tell several stories of real significant business changes that we've made as a result of something that we found in the analytics. And I'll tell you a story that is not in the book, so that if anybody wants to download the book, they get 5 new stories. Some time ago, I was working with an employment lawyer in California, and her business was training large California companies in workplace, things like how to prevent sexual discrimination, sexual harassment at work, right? That kind of stuff. How to train employees in that kind of area, like what is harassment, what isn't, so on. She didn't do litigation. She wasn't a lawyer that went to court in that sense. But her whole thing was sort of stay out of court for her clients, you know. Now, what we did was we looked at so she had a huge amount of content on the site because she had to prove her expertise and everything. And she wrote a lot of very, very interesting articles. And so we had a search engine on the site, and the search engine on your site is a fantastic market research tool. It tells you all sorts of things. It tells you what words people use to describe what you have, which sometimes might be different from your jargon. And that's important to know, right? In terms of how to market or how to talk to people. Yeah. But one of the other things it does is it tells you what people are looking for on your site, and which may be, so it's what they expect to find at your site, and that may be stuff that you don't have, but which you could have. And based on the searches, it became very clear to us that there were many people coming to the site who were not the corporate people. They were not the people who would hire her, but they were employees, regular, ordinary employees saying, I think I'm being harassed. Do I have a case? How do I do this? What do I do? And we created some very impulse purchase priced kind of ebooks. So, you know, with all sorts of legal disclaimers, but, you know, many cases that people think might be harassment are legally not. So before you spend a lot of money on a lawyer, read this $20 ebook and see if you may have a case. And we did that for, I'm being accused of harassment, what do I do? I think I've been unfairly dismissed. What do I do? I think I should be getting overtime. What do I do? Right. And also some manuals for companies that didn't want to hire her to do a whole training, but from the employer side as well. And obviously they cost a bit more. But the point being that we saw an opportunity to create all these information products, which of course, the beauty of those is once they're up and running, you know, the person puts in their credit card and they get the product and there's no fulfillment cost. And these sold, you know, several thousand a month. I mean, it was a really nice kind of sideline for the business that was incredibly cost effective once it was there. And the idea for it came from looking at what people were putting into the search engine. So we wouldn't have had any idea just by looking at the site that this was all happening.
I've seen some of those search engine plugins, and I've always wondered, why are those useful? So now you've actually given, now you've actually explained why you'd want, what the value of that is. And that's the first time I've thought about that. That's actually quite
I
genius. I
mean,
mean, that's your
sometimes
own.
it tells you really obviously, like I worked for a parts manufacturer, um, and they sold multiple parts for all sorts of things. But they changed, every so often they would change the part number or the name or whatever. And they were losing business and they didn't know why. And they had people coming and then they didn't buy anything. And again, we went, okay, well, what's going on? Looked in the search engine and realized that a lot of people were coming in, they were putting in an old part number or name, and the search engine would come back and say, sorry, we don't have that. So they go away and buy it somewhere else. And I mean, it sounds really simple when you say it, like, what do you need? You need a lookup table that maps the old name onto the new name, and you're back in business, right?
Yeah.
But without knowing why business was going down, and that was one of the causes, you can't do anything about it.
Yeah. Well, that ties into understanding your customer and not allowing websites to do all the work for you, because a website, I think, is a living entity almost. It has to be, as you said, updated. You can't just put it up and then expect it to do its job forever. So I like that example of finding out what people are searching for on your actual site versus just waiting for Google to give you details. Let me see what I've got over here as well. So those are two great examples that you've given on where analytics has made a tangible difference to businesses. You mentioned not just using Google Analytics. You spoke about some other platforms. What other platforms should people be looking at other than Google?
Well, okay, I really don't, excuse me, I don't want to be in the business of recommending any particular tool.
Yeah.
But, for people that really do have privacy concerns and don't trust Google, that's one of the areas where people are looking for alternatives. And also, I can't remember if we talked about this before, Google Analytics 4, which is the new version, is really complex, not easy to look at in the beginning. And once you get used to it, it's okay. But, it's much less intuitive and user-friendly than the previous version. And another reason that people are looking for other solutions is that their interfaces are much more like the previous version of Google, and it's what people are used to, how they're used to approaching analytics and so on. So, there are, and I personally think the Google Analytics 4 is fantastic once you get used to it. And I'm not going to tell you it's not thoroughly annoying and frustrating at times. So, I can totally understand people who do have had enough of it.
Well, I've got to teach students how to use Google Analytics, so it's always good getting different perspectives. Another platform that I've recently sort of started using is Bing as well, because typically we thought just Google, but with ChatGPT being bought by Microsoft and them adding Copilot and a whole bunch of additional tools to their search engine, Bing is actually becoming not just the poor cousin of search, it's actually becoming quite a useful platform. And I think especially since ChatGPT is using Bing for its searches, if you're not on Bing, if you're not integrating your site or advertising on Bing, you might actually be losing out on this next wave of search queries which are coming through ChatGPT.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think Google is still the sort of preeminent search engine, but absolutely there are others. And some people, there is some smaller search engines like DuckDuckGo, which is more, incognito kind of thing. So yeah, and again, the analytics can tell you where traffic is coming from in terms of search engines.
Yeah.
And if you start to see that you're getting visitors from Bing or somewhere else, that would certainly be something to look at in terms of expanding that.
Now let's go back to website basics. If you had to say you're a new business and you want to create a website, let's say we're selling software as a service. I've got a new accounting package that I want to sell and I'm starting from scratch. How would you go about consulting a client like this? How would you set up your website?
Well, so obviously you want to think about how you're going to market it and what your calls to action are going to be. So that's important too. So, maybe this is a lead generation site as opposed to a direct commerce site. But what kind of content do you need in order to get people engaged and interested? I mean, you have to think about the customer journey, all stages of the customer journey. So from acquisition, which might be a search engine or some sort of promotion you do, like a podcast or a piece of content, and advertising, if you're going to do that, how are you going to grab them? How are you going to get their attention? How are you going to draw them into your offerings? What kind of content do you need to do that? How do you move them towards making a decision to fulfill your major outcome, which would either be a purchase or a lead form or whatever? And then, what kind of ways can your website support them post-purchase? So especially with software, a lot of people are going to have support questions. So do you want to have a user community? Do you want to have a knowledge base? So you need to think all the way through the process of the customer interacting with you, from when they first hear about you to when you hope that they'll become a long-term loyal customer.
So to take it on a slight tangent, you mentioned Adobe earlier. Now, most people, when they think of Adobe, only think about Photoshop and Premiere Pro and things like that. But Adobe has a whole suite of other services related to marketing. Do you work in that? What are your sort of offerings when it comes to Adobe?
No, to be honest, I don't work with Adobe because my client base tends to be smaller and medium-sized businesses. Adobe Analytics is powerful, but it's also powerfully priced, and it has its own, you have to be a consultant with clear expertise specifically in Adobe, and that's just not my thing.
Okay. Yeah, that's a tough one, because I'm actually an Adobe partner, so I've got access to all of this, and they've got some marvelous playbooks and processes, but it really is enterprise, for enterprise customers. So I think for most people, the products and services that you've mentioned are suitable for them, but there is another level. So once your website gets to a level where you've got multiple countries, you've got thousands of SKUs, you've got big databases, you've got multiple languages, you can't use WordPress.
No, but again, don't forget, and I'm not trying to push Google here, but just to remind ourselves that Google does have an enterprise level offering of Google Analytics 4, which isn't free, but obviously it has a lot more capabilities in terms of a lot of data and so on.
Yeah. And that basically is based on your spend. And I know here in the Nordics, we've got quite a big Google office in Oslo, and they've got teams that support large companies in terms of their analytics, their Google ads and aspects like that. So yeah.
Right. It's quite a hefty fee, but obviously you get service for that. I mean, exactly. Most people don't get any help from Google if they're using the free version, right?
No. Good luck getting support out of Google. Mm-hmm. But if I had to ask you, what is something that if I had to ask you, what is something interesting about Philippa that we won't find on your other podcast interviews and that we haven't discussed on this one? What would surprise folks to know about you?
Gosh.
Your teapot collection that you've
Well, yes, I was thinking about tea. I mean, obviously, I'm from the UK, but I live in California now. But I have to import my tea from the UK, and I drink a lot of it.
Don't they have tea in the States? Do you have specific?
It's terrible. Sorry.
Just the sweet tea, that Lipton's.
Well, no, Lipton. Yeah, it's just not strong enough. I mean, I drink. My mother used to say that my tea looked like beer because I drink it really quite strong. And
okay. So what is your go-to cup of cha?
Well, there's a British this is going to be advertising, I'm afraid. There's a British supermarket called Sainsbury's, which has a gold blend tea. That is my favorite. So there we go, Sainsbury's, free plug.
Okay, good old Sainsbury's. I'm a Lady Grey fan, so that's Earl Grey, but with little bits of orange in it.
Right.
Philippa, it's been great chatting to you. And you mentioned I actually read one of your ebooks, which is quite cool, and the design was also quite lovely with the little monsters on them. So it was quite engaging reading that. Where can I send folks to find out more information to help improve their websites and analytics journey?
Yeah, so I'd be happy to meet people on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with more people, and if you have any questions, please send them through. My website is called Websites That Win, ebook.com. So hopefully you'll put a link to that. And also to the ebook is on there and it's free to download. So, please go ahead and grab it. And my goal for the ebook, it's 5 stories, as I said, of insights from analytics that led to significant business transformation. And my goal is it's all in English. There's no interfaces. There's no techie stuff. I do tell you where in the analytics we found it, but I don't go into any particular detail because that's not the point. The goal is to inspire you, if you're a business owner or a marketer, to read a story and go, I wonder if that's happening to us, or I wonder if we could do something like that.
It's always better to learn from other people's mistakes than to do it yourself. So I suppose that will be one of the values. Well, Philippa, it's been lovely chatting to you. Thank you so much, and have a great weekend.
Thank you. You too.
Now, before we wrap up, don't forget to show some love for From Startup to Wunderbrand by subscribing on your favorite podcast platform. If you'd like to help us grow, tell your friends, share on social media, and leave us a review. For those of you who want to dive a little bit deeper into the topic, join me on Twitter @NickCooner. Let's connect and chat about all things branding and digital. Until next time,